Hey guys, Luke here from Flukes Kitesurfing, and in today's video we're going to go through how you can get your strapless jumps higher. So we'll be talking about your strapless board off, trying to send it as high as you possibly can. Hopefully you've already got some type of basis, you're doing some small board off jumps, and this video will teach a little bit more about how you can climb up into the sky and try and maximize the wind and maximize your kite's power to try and get as high as you possibly can, plus a bit of technique of course for how you can land it and how you can even climb in the first place. So it's a lot of fun because this is probably one of the fastest ways to be able to jump higher and higher with a strapless board, and so really we'll be covering it all in depth in every step by step. But to give you a bit of a brief overview, essentially to jump high with a strapless board off, we're going to be sending it at quite a high speed, as you know, moderate to fast. The faster you go, the better you're going to be able to jump. Looking for that ramp, sending it off the ramp at the same time, trying to use our legs to let the board climb up into the wind. We're going to be sheeting in with the bar to try and maximize that height. Then we're going to be controlling that kite with our backhand as we reach down and actually grab the board with our front hand, sail through the air, and then do a nice loop at the very end to land it with some speed and control, and then you continue riding in the same direction. So that's the overview, and let's go through it step by step. Okay, so let's talk about the launch. So first off, in order to get high into the sky, there's sort of two components. One is that you send it off a big ramp and that will kick you up into the sky. The other is that you're really powered with the kite and you can actually use the power of the kite by sheeting in to lift you up into the sky. The best is actually a combination of both of them. So you're looking to ride powered, almost overpowered sometimes, to get that maximum height. If you've got an oncoming ramp, that's also going to kick you up. Now, if you've only got ramps but you're riding underpowered, what will happen is you'll have trouble with the landings. The landings will you'll drop a little bit into the water and you'll find it hard. So one of the benefits of riding really powered and almost overpowered as you're going into the jump is that the landing becomes a lot easier, if you will, because it lifts you up a little bit more and the kite can take that weight, so it softens the landing as you land. So you're looking for powered conditions and also a nice oncoming ramp that's going to help you lift up into the sky. So when we've got those conditions, we're going to be tacking across the wind, of course. High speed is good, nice and fast to boost you off that ramp. And as we're coming to the ramp, start to move the kite closer to 12, but not actually behind 12. So for this particular jump, we actually keep the kite at 12 or in front of 12, just slightly in the direction of travel, in order to do the jump right until the very last moment. So for the launch, we're bringing the kite up to sort of close to 12, we're eyeing up that ramp, and then we're going to go up off the ramp. Now, one thing about the launch is, and this took me a little bit to get, was that you're actually going sort of straight, almost across the wind, because your apparent wind that you've built by the speed that you're going actually makes the board or the wind, the apparent wind, sort of feel like it's coming more towards you, and that actually helps the board climb up with you. So you don't actually have to turn the board into the wind, you just go straight up off the ramp, and at the same time you've moved the kite closer to 12 and you sheet in and start to pull yourself up into the sky. You still load and pop off the tail, and you still bring your front knee up a little bit to let the board climb with you. But again, you're not sort of popping into the wind or into the the planet's wind. You're popping into your apparent wind with the speed that you're generating yourself. So now, as we're starting to go up, one of the tips that I have for you is to actually try and delay when you reach down to grab the board. I think that this is probably one of the biggest differences on trying to get higher and higher, is actually to use both of those hands on the bar and use the kite's power to climb up into the wind a little bit before you reach down and grab the board. What this will do is teach you to sort of keep the board on your feet, and that way you can really pull in on the bar because you've got both of your hands there. So as you start to climb, you're sheeting in. You might want to try and count to 2, right? And we'll go through some more of this in tips in a minute. But as you're climbing, and 1, 2, and then reach down, grab the board with your front hand, and that will leave your backhand on the bar. So now that you've got your backhand on the bar, it's really important that you actually lock your wrist and you don't let the kite send back behind your head. That can be a common mistake, but if you're already doing small board offs, you've probably already got that one dialed. So you're sort of driving that kite forward, trying to keep it at 12 or slightly in front of 12, in the direction of travel, and now you're going up into the sky. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to do when you're in the air. So we've gone through the steps to get the board into a hand, and now we're flying through the air. You've locked your wrist, that's really key, and you're keeping that kite at 12 or slightly in front of 12. That's probably one of the most important things here, because as you get higher and higher and higher with your jumps, what you'll find is it doesn't actually get any worse if you crash, if you throw the board away and crash, as long as you keep that kite at 12. So as long as you've got the kite above you, when you come into the water, plonk into the water, it's not too extreme, even when you get higher and higher, as long as you've got that kite above you. If you send the kite back, then what you'll find is you'll free fall as the kite is actually on the side of the wind window. So really focusing on keeping that board, that hand locked, and keeping that kite sort of driving forward. By doing so, you'll be able to sheet in still with that hand because you're locking it, and you'll be able to try and sail a little bit and sort of fly through the sky for as long as you can. At the same time, you're just holding onto the board. As always, we're trying to grab the board sort of in the middle of the board, so it's not right at the nose, so you've got good control on the rail. Then, as we're flying, another thing you might notice as you start to get more height is you actually start to swing under the kite. So if you can imagine, as you've gone up, now we're in the sky and we're flying, then the kite was in front of us a little bit, and if you've got enough time, by going high enough, which you will have, then you actually swing under the kite just like on a swing in the playground, and you'll feel yourself actually swing. So what's really good about that is it's going to help you with the landing, but it's something to look for. That's when you'll know you're sort of getting high enough, you'll start to feel that swing under it, and the most important takeaway really when you're flying is just maintaining control of that wrist, maintaining the position of your kite at 12 or slightly in front of 12, so that you really feel like you can come down without really injuring yourself or looping it or anything crazy like that. So the biggest real tips for flying is just being under control with your hand. So having that one hand on the bar, one hand on the board, and just sort of sailing through the air. Okay, so now let's go through how we're going to land it. So we're flying through the air, we're under control, nicely firm wrist, we feel that we're swinging under the kite, and we can see that we're coming into the water and we're going to start to need to land. The number one thing about the land is all about the timing of your landing loop. Pulling it at the perfect time in order to give you enough lift and make sure you've got enough speed so that you can land sort of relatively softly under control. And so what we're going to be doing, the steps, is we've got the board in our front hand, kite in our back hand, the kite's at 12 or slightly in front, and as we're swinging in, we're starting to come in, what I like to do is actually loop the kite all the way around into sort of like almost like a heli loop. But the way I seem to do it when I review my own video is I actually shoot out quickly, slide my hand across to the edge of the bar, and then crank it in to really try and get a nice tight loop above my head. So that's really has worked for me, and the timing of it is typically your legs might be 2 meters above the water. What I found is the higher that you go, the earlier you have to pull that loop. The lower that you are, the later you can pull that loop to still land it. So it's all about your height. The higher you'll notice the same thing. As you get higher and higher and higher, you actually have to crank that loop earlier to make sure it's fully taking your weight as you start to land. So the steps in themselves are that we're coming in to land. We can see we're about 2 meters above. We're going to need that loop. You've probably already been practicing that with the smaller board offs anyway. Sheet out a little bit, crank it in to loop it, and then put the board back under your feet in the same direction that you were traveling originally. And what I find is sometimes I have to sort of lean against that kite a little bit because the kite is looping back the other way. So you sort of lean against that kite. The direction that you'll be traveling is almost 100% downwind, because even though you're going across the wind for the launch, as you do bigger jumps, the wind starts to carry you and you fly all the way downwind and you land going downwind and landing, hopefully going nice and fast. So prepare yourself to land fast. Just depending on the wind speed, it's going to make a lot of that, right? So if the higher the wind speed, so to give an example, if I do a big jump on the 12, as I'm coming into land, even doing that heli loop, it's sort of slow because you've only got sort of 12, like 20 knots maybe. But if I'm doing it on the 8 and I'm lit, right? If I'm lit and I'm going out and I'm trying to do it on the 8, then I'm going to be landing at lightning speed because it's blowing 30 knots, and so you're going to really be, anticipate that speed as you're coming in. Okay, so let's recap it. So powered conditions, feeling nice and powered. We're going to be going nice and fast, looking for an oncoming ramp. As we see that oncoming ramp, kite moves slightly back up closer to 12, but slightly in front of in the direction of travel. Look for the ramp. We're going to load off the back foot and actually try and drive the kite straight up into the apparent wind. So at the moment, the wind's at my back, so you know, you might go like that's get into the wind, but with apparent wind, you're actually driving straight forward across the wind. Try and compress those legs, let the board climb up, and try and delay reaching down to grab it. As you start to climb up with both hands on the bar, at some point you'll feel like, okay, I need to reach and grab it, try and grab it in front of your front foot, next to your front foot, or even back a tiny bit right in the middle of the board. So now we've got control of the board, and with the kite, we're fixing that wrist and continuing to sheet in to try and maximize that ride and that height time. Sheeting in, but not sending the kite back, fixing that wrist, trying to fly it forward a little bit. Now we're sort of flying through the air, and you'll feel you start to swing under the kite. As we're coming in, you can see your spot you're landing. You're coming in from about 2 meters still, that's where your feet are. Sheet out a little bit, just move your hand across, sheet in, crank that loop. Now, and as that sort of gives you that little bit of lift and acceleration, board goes down in front of you, and you actually land on it in the same direction, lean against that loop a little bit potentially, and then you can drive back in the same direction that you're going. Some final tips for how I learned it. I think that one of the biggest challenges for me was actually being able to drive the board up into the wind with my legs and trying to sort of not be too tempted to reach down and grab the board. You have to be patient and let that board come up to you. The longer you do that, the higher you're going to be able to get in the long run, and it's going to help with other tricks as well. So it's really my rule I'll tell myself, okay, you're not allowed to grab the board until you count to 2. So I'd be sending it as fast as I can, looking for that ramp, go off the ramp, and I'd be like 1, 2 as I'm sheeting in, and then I would grab it. So that might work for you as well, just that little reminder to make sure that you're not trying to grab it too early. Another thing about it is that I found that, you know, even though you're going higher and higher, having the kite at 12, sheeting in, it actually doesn't, it's not too aggressive. If anything goes wrong, just keep that kite at 12, throw the board away, and just sort of hit the water. You hit it with a bit of speed, but it's nothing too dramatic. I think that one of the biggest things about doing higher jumps is actually wanting to do higher jumps. You see a lot of people when they're trying to do higher jumps and they're sort of sheeting out and sort of almost avoiding it. So really try and tell yourself as well, like, I want to maximize my jump out of this kite. And so to maximize your jump, you really need to sheet all the way in. You need to send it off the ramp with speed and sheet in and commit to climbing up into the sky. So we're doing that with the board by saying, with the bar by saying, yeah, I want to go as high as I can, and at the same time trying to use that technique with your body and legs to let the board come up. So it's a combination of actually really wanting it, because that's going to make you send it. Even if the board doesn't come with you, you'll get used to that height and that swinging around. Plus adding that bit of technique to let the board climb up. So that's sort of what I had to tell myself. You know, I'm like, okay, I'm going to send it. Let's go as high as I possibly can. Plus, I was like, don't reach down. Lift that knee. Try and get that knee to come up to let the board climb with me, and then try and grab it. Something that really stood out to me was as I started getting higher, I started feeling that swing. That was a new feeling for me. Hadn't really felt that before. Even with some of my loop jumps, like powered loop jumps, I haven't, you know, this feels sort of different because you're kind of dangling under it. You've gone so high, you're kind of dangling under it, so you sort of feel this swing. The more you swing, the more that kite will heli loop, because you've sort of traveled past the kite a little bit. So as you get higher, what you'll find is that landing loop stops pulling you so much in a forward direction and starts pulling you more in an upward direction. So that actually helps the landing a lot. The other point is really cranking that loop as you're coming into land. because if you just gently do the loop, it'll draw this big arc all the way around through the power zone, and you'll really get accelerated when you hit the water. So you might even get sort of thrown over the nose. So really committing to the loop as you're still in the air, and sort of trying to make sure that it's doing a tight radius, plus being high enough that you actually have swung under it a little bit so it does go around on top of you. While you're practicing, it's going to be a bit of trial and error getting that timing right. So you'll definitely find sometimes you've come down and you've tried to loop it, but you've plonked into the water and then you accelerate out. You'll definitely find that sometimes you're still this high off the water and you get sent into a loop, right? And that's all just part of getting that timing right. Eventually, how it's meant to feel is that you crank the loop and you'll feel just this real nice glide into the water, and you can sort of land on it nice and smooth. You'll be going fast, but it doesn't feel too heavy. So I think look, it took a little bit of practice, but I think it's a good trick to learn and try and get higher and higher and higher. You can just keep pushing this, using this same technique of climbing up, both hands on the bar, kite slightly in front of 12, dangling around and then cranking that landing loop. You can go as high as you possibly want, right? You can just keep sending it up and up and up and up. And that's one of the benefits of actually leaving the kite slightly in the forward motion and not doing a scent jump. The forward motion, one of the things I really like about this jump is you can travel long distances. Some of the other jump techniques, what you do is you send the kite back and you sort of swing up and then you sort of dangle around and then you land. But this one, you can just go and go and go in this big sort of long jump. And so because of that, the kite is perfectly positioned for this heli loop landing. It's slightly on the other side of 12, if you will, so you can jump and fly for as long as you possibly want, and then it comes around all the way around the top because it starts on the other side, so you get that lift. So if you do that kite flying technique, then really you can just keep sending it higher and higher and higher and practice and getting higher and higher, and it's a lot of fun. So anyway, hope that helps you jump higher. This is Luke with Flukes Kitesurfing. Of course, leave us any comments if you've got questions, and we'll see you in coming tutorials.